Hello and welcome to another Aish On Campus Live with me hosting Danielle Jeffries. I'm really excited about our speaker today and the person I'm going to be asking some questions to. But before we start, I want to take this opportunity to share some news about another really exciting opportunity which is happening over the summer with Aish UK. And this is called Venture. Now, Venture is a paid internship which involves the internship, Jewish enrichment, and leadership and development, three amazing core aspects of the program. So if your summer plans has been cancelled like mine have, and are wondering how to maximize your time and get some experience and do something you really enjoy, then this program is for you for many reasons. But please note there are really limited spaces and applications are going to be stopped in the next few days because of the overload of applications. So get excited, get applying, and I'm going to show you a video just to introduce Venture. I've applied. It looks really exciting, so get your applications in ASAP. Now, to tonight's show, to introduce our guest, is Yafi Newman. She's an army wife for 3 years to a French-American-Israeli husband, and she currently lives in Jerusalem in Israel. But at the moment, I've been told she's in lockdown with her family in Florida. She visits and at the moment is with her Hispanic mother in Florida and hopes to see her as often as she can. And she's also traveled the world with her husband, backpacking for, like, I'm told, almost a year and hoping to return home after COVID's all over. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Yafi Newman. Hi, Yafi.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me, Danielle.
Of course. So welcome to the show. It's really great to have you. It's a massive pleasure. And a lot of our audience are based in the UK and a lot of Jewish students in the Jewish community here, and we really want to hear about your experience and your stories. So first, you haven't tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm 25 years old. I grew up here in South Florida, and I went to Israel for my year in Israel, for my year in SEM. I went to Nishmat, and I had zero intention whatsoever of staying. Super Zionistic, very much I loved Israel, but just thought that I'd come back, thought that I'd go to Stern, pre-med, the whole 9 yards, very classic. And all I can say is man plans, God laughs. When I went there, I met my husband, I fell in love with the country, and I never looked back.
I mean, Israel is, like most people who are watching know, it's like a most beautiful city. And so I've heard so many people who we meant to come home, we just couldn't leave. We just couldn't go. So I think that definitely relates to a lot of people who are watching. So I came across a really powerful piece that you wrote. The link is going to be attached on aish.com about your experience with your Black father and how powerful this was. And I just want you to talk about this and tell everyone, summarize it and speak about your experiences and what you remember.
Yeah. So being Black in a Jewish community here in America is very much so sometimes an isolating experience. I was super fortunate that I was born into my community. My father joined the community that I grew up in that is now a ginormous community of thousands of Jewish families when it had less than 40 families. So I was very lucky. and I was pretty much born into it. I never had to prove my Judaism inside my community. And I know that that is something that a lot of Jews of color do have to go through all over the world in their various communities. However, whenever I would leave my community, there was a lot of, I would say, prejudice and assumptions and bias about if I really was Jewish, and stereotypes about me and whatnot.
I mean, I think it's amazing that to have like feel so comfortable within your community and like to have that almost like another like, extended family aspect that everyone should have. But the fact that, like you say, when you've left that community, that's kind of changed is like really like it's really sad. Like it's not how it should be. I mean, the topic obviously everyone's mind at the moment is everything that's happened with the George Floyd case and the Black Lives Matter movement, which is obviously really, really admirable. But what are your thoughts on like the news at the moment?
I think that a lot of people tend to put the focus on the politics of the movement, which is really, to me, sad. Like taking Black Lives Matter and just putting that aside, just the general cause, like forgetting a specific organization, the general cause being stopping systematic racism all over the world. But for me, I particularly spoke up because I do feel that there is a lot of racism within the Jewish community, not just against Black people, but all types. And like that to me is the point. That to me is what I think that people should be focusing on, racism as a whole, not what organization said it or what protests it came from or whatnot, but just moreover, are you contributing to the problem? Perhaps subconsciously, you know? Not necessarily everyone is doing something overt that is an issue, but I think everyone is born with an internal bias. I know that I am. And I think that every single person out there can be doing something to help overall further people of different races all over the world who are dealing with racism.
I mean, I think that a lot, like recently, like people are possibly even calling out racism like openly and talking about it. And I think that you mentioned like it isn't necessarily doing things overtly that can help or cannot help. Like education is definitely key, and like making yourself aware of things. Like, do you feel like pain or anger towards any of the things that are going on? Like, have you wanted to say even more?
I mean, it's hard not to feel pain and anger, for sure, especially growing up as someone who had a Black father, and all of my brothers are very much so African American men, and many members of my family are African Americans, and hearing the experiences that they had to deal with firsthand with police or with just general citizens, member of the Jewish communities, horrible things that were said to them, horrible experiences that they had. It's very hard not to feel anger, and even harder not to feel pain. But I very much so try to take those feelings, because I don't think that anger and pain are a helpful way to communicate any form of emotion. And I don't think they'll get any point across well ever. And I try to take those experiences and put them in a way that people can connect to and understand, even if they don't have the background that I have, because everyone can understand what it feels like to be rejected or to experience prejudice. Even if people have only experienced it to a small degree, and as Jews, we definitely have experienced that to a very high degree, all over. So
100%. And I think that helping people relate to it and understand it really just it hits home more deeply, and people want to make a difference because they're like, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, or I've experienced that myself in a different way, so I don't want it to happen to anyone else. Of course. I mean, you mentioned like you and your brothers experiencing like childhood racism or prejudice within the like Jewish community.
Yeah.
Like, can you delve in any experiences that you've had specifically?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that something that people fail to realize is that this is not a new issue. This is just something that has been going on for hundreds of years. And it's not something that I'm speaking out about newly because all of a sudden I'm dealing with it, but more just because I feel like perhaps now people are ready and open to listening. I can tell you that from when I was, one of my earliest memories as like a little 4 or 5-year-old kid, we went to a Hanukkah event in a neighboring community. And there were a lot of people there who we knew, but a lot of people who also didn't know us. And I remember that one of the more esteemed members who helped put together that event, I was playing with their kids. And the mother came over at a certain point and grabbed her kids away and was like, you don't play with the Schwarzes. Schwarzes are dirty. And I remember being so confused because as a little kid, I didn't even understand what they were calling me. Like, I was like, did I have something on me? Like, is it on my face? Like, I was so confused. And like, I remember going back to my parents and relaying the story, and they, of course, were horrified. And they explained to me what exactly, of course, in a very watered down version for a child, but what exactly I had just gone through. And I grew up here in South Florida in a very different age. All my siblings are a lot older than me. And I know that they themselves grew up in an even more, I grew up in a very modern Orthodox community. They grew up in more of Haredi Yeshivish communities, little kids. And I know that seeing a Black little boy with puffy Afro payas, they stuck out like sore thumbs, and they just experienced so much hateful and terrible experiences, but they didn't let it make them bitter people. They all did what they could to remain in the community, all did what they could to raise above it. Some of them were not successful and felt that they didn't have a place anymore, and felt that it was too much for them. Some of them were, but yeah, definitely loads and loads of experiences of that growing up in the Frum community.
And I think that one thing you touched on then was the fact that it isn't a new issue. This, like, it's been going on for a long time, and like you said, like for you might have had a different experience to your brothers and your family, but at the same time, like, it was still continuing, just in a different way and in a different atmosphere. And I think that that's a really important point to know. And like, even when you're a child, like you said, your experiences is like in school and stuff, like, oh, at the Hanukkah party, like you were naive to it almost. And like, I feel like a lot of the time, like, we are naive, and like education is so key in a way that's like adapted to different ages, of course, but like to do that is so important because that's the only way people learn. And I think that's the only way to get rid of the naivety in a way.
I think that, like, I think that's,
go on.
Sorry. No, I was going to say that I think that's a super important point. I think that something that people fail to be able to hear or understand is that when people bring up issues of racism in the Jewish community, in the world, and people say, try to work on things, like look in yourself internally, perhaps you have a prejudice or bias towards, say, some subgroup or another. It doesn't mean that people are saying you are a monster or you're a terrible person. Everyone has internal bias. Everyone grows up in a certain family, a certain community, with certain surroundings, schools, friends. All these things affect us when we're growing up, and they might make us think certain stereotypes are a reality. And that's fine, because we all have that. The question just is, when you're confronted with that and people are saying, well, actually that stereotype isn't reality, that stereotype isn't the be all and end all, are people able to move forward and say, perhaps I can work on that. Perhaps I could be more educated, like you said, because not everyone knows a stranger's background, you know? I don't know everything that there is to know about the crisis in Yemen, you know, because I don't have any people in my life who are like that, but I'm aware of my ignorance. And when confronted with that, I have no problem educating myself so that I am able to be more sensitive and thoughtful going forward.
And I also think that's why it's so important to have these kind of conversations with people who have really experienced it. And like, for me, as like a young Jewish student in Manchester, like I might not have encountered like another Jewish person like who's been through the experiences that you've been through. So to have this conversation is so important, because people might think it's not going to happen to me, and that's not the case. So I think that's really, really important. I mean, we've got a comment here from Daniel Rowe, just like thanking you for like sharing your experiences and highlighting that, like I say, this is a problem within our community as well. And like, we need to discuss it and like talk about that and hear about it, because I think it's really, really enlightening for me. Do you think that like it's changing? Do you think that within the Jewish community we're becoming more accepting because like you might have experienced a different thing like than your brothers experienced or whatever?
I do think that society as a whole definitely has improved. I don't know that I feel that it's so radically different, you know? My father lived through the civil rights movement in the 60s. And of course, when you compare like what life looked like for people of color back then, specifically African Americans, today, of course, things have grown, things have changed. I think also same can be said of the Jewish communities, that from what my siblings experienced growing up many years ago to what I experienced growing up is very different. Having said that, I do think that there is something that is kind of hard to combat. Like, we're not fighting for the right to vote now. We're not fighting for something that's quite so tangible and easily put into words or legislation. And I think that makes it harder for people to be able to see it and work on it. I know personally that what I've run into a lot in the Jewish community is less so overt racism. It's less so people saying things that are outright disgusting that most people would like have like a visceral reaction to, because at least in America, being politically correct is of the utmost importance and you don't want to say something wrong. However, I'm more running into, for most of my life, more subtle racism. Microaggressions, perhaps they're not meant intentionally, but things that people are saying that are really not okay, but aren't outright wrong. So it's an improvement, but now it's a different issue that is almost harder to pinpoint.
And I think it's adapting and keep going to push that. Like, it's almost like you say, some of these things people think or they say or like might not be intentional, but that means that prejudgment and those pre-feelings that aren't intentional need to be changed as well, because there's clearly something wrong with them as well. So it's adapting and seeing that actually there are other issues that need to be addressed, that like irrelevant of what's happened in the past. Like, you've addressed them ones, great, so move on and address the other issues and like continue with that and like go deeper. Definitely. Like, do you have any like, what do you think needs to be done? Like, how can we like move our communities to a healthier place? Like, our Jewish community, what do you think we can do within that to help each other and educate?
Right. So I think that this touches back on what you started to talk about, which is education, I think, is the first step. I think that it's very easy as like educated individuals to feel like we have a good grasp on a situation that might not be personal to us. And I just in the past week have been overwhelmed with like the sheer, like literally hundreds of messages from people who have reached out to me saying, oh my God, I just watched this historical film. I just watched this documentary. I just read this autobiography from like actual historical fact, not fictional movies like The Help. And they were like, I had no idea that Blacks went through that. I was raised in America. I was a professor of XYZ. I cannot believe that I was unaware of these heinous acts that were committed in history not so long ago, or perhaps sometimes very long ago. So I think the first step is for people to properly educate themselves, because I think a lot of people feel that they understandably are a lot more aware of the situation than they actually are. And I think as Jews, for example, when traveling here in America, we traveled quite a bit before we started backpacking, and we were in some pretty rural areas at certain points where people had never met Jews before. And the comments that they threw at us, and I don't think they were malicious, just out of curiosity, were so like, whoa, like the only thing you've ever heard of with Jews is the Holocaust or Israel. And even the Holocaust, they didn't have any proper information about. And to me, that was mind blowing. Like, how can you not know about these disgusting things that happened in history? So I think that you could apply that to anything that a lot of people are just not aware when it's not their own personal history. So I think that people should first try to educate themselves as well as they can. I think that the second step after educating themselves, and I think by default for most people that will give them a greater sensitivity to certain issues, is to then do a lot of introspective work. There's a lot of books that have been written. There are a lot of podcasts out there that people can read that I think will really challenge them internally and help people ask themselves some pretty difficult and uncomfortable questions. And after that, after a person has done that internal work and is more open and more aware and more understanding, I think then the most important thing after that is action. Not everyone's going to be an activist. Not everyone needs to be an activist, but people can do very little things, like at their Shabbos table when someone makes a joke about Schwarzes. They can say, you know what, that's not really okay. Like, it's not okay to call Black people like that. It's not okay to refer to them like that. And I think by virtue of doing that, that'll eventually trickle down to the next generation, which to me is the ultimate goal, to ensure that the next generation of kids in our communities do not grow up having these stereotypes and prejudice embedded in their heads from an early age, so that children like mine one day will be able to come into this world and be accepted.
I think that's so important, and like the future is our children will be the future, and to educate them is so important. And like I say, going back to that naivety, like to remove, like all the points you touched upon are going to remove that naivety in people. I mean, it's awful that like sad situations and like things that are going on, that the only thing that can make us realize this, but like we have to take that and use it to remove our naivety. And I think that we can build that for the next generation. Like, do you think that this is going to leave us with like a good note for the next generation? Like, we're going to be able to, do you think we can do this?
I definitely think that we can. I think that it's going to be extremely difficult. I know that I've done some of this work myself on other issues, on this issue, and it's very difficult. It's almost painful at times. It's very uncomfortable, but I do definitely think it's possible. I think that a lot of people, I've been surprised by the output that I did receive. Some things didn't surprise me and they were just disappointing, but overall, I think that from even 10 years ago, our community has grown and is starting to step in the direction that's a lot more open to listening and open to understanding and accepting of change.
And I think that's an amazing outlook. And I think that's like really a key message that like I want to leave this conversation on, is that like we have the future. We want to educate people. We will educate ourselves so we can educate other people in the future to like make this change and like remove this naivety and like really make a change in the world, not just within our Jewish community, but like in the whole world, and like do this for the future. I mean, like it's really been like fascinating talking to you and hearing your like first-hand experiences and perspectives. I mean, like I've really felt touched by this, because I feel like having these conversations really helps people understand and makes it more personal and like affects people more deeply. So I really, really want to thank you for your time and like to give this opportunity to speak to us. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is really, really lovely. And I'm just thankful for other people out there who have cared to listen. It really means a lot.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to go to Rabbi Gideon for the thought of the day.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much, Yafi. I know you're backstage listening, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank her for her time and also thank her for sharing the most, really personal and incredible journey of from herself and some of the experiences that she shared. And it's definitely, when you watch the news and read the news at the moment, voices like that need to be heard, and especially within our community, we need to be more sensitive. There's a lot of work that has to be done to make the world, like Yafi was mentioning at the end, to make the world a better place for our children. And it's kind of on that theme that I wanted to kind of tie this tonight's show together with a beautiful idea in Judaism, which is, so many times it comes up that students will ask questions, and the question is, does Judaism believe in this or this? And so often the answer is, actually, Judaism believes in a beautiful harmony, a balance between the two. And really, the question that we were talking about this evening is one that I think ties into that idea as well. The world and differences between people, between cultures, between personalities, between different human beings in the world. A question could be asked, why did Hashem create the world with so many different things? But it's when you recognize that in order to listen to a piece of music, you need different notes to make that music. Because if you don't have different notes and every note's the same, it's not music, it's just a sound. But when you have differentiation in the world, you can merge them together into something that's beautiful, that's something that's harmonious. And it's for that reason that so much of what Jewish life focuses on is not in the extreme one way or the other, but actually is a harmony, a link or a connection between lots of different ideas. And that leads beautifully and almost like kind of set up as a beautiful link, a segue into a program, a project that Aish UK have put together and are launching literally over the past few days. We've launched and we've seen an incredible response. We've seen loads of applications to this program, but this program is one that I believe represents the harmony of lots of different important facets of building what it means to be a Jew, building what it means to build the future of the Jewish community. Our venture project merges together internships, giving people experience in the professional world, especially at a time like this when it's difficult to get that experience, together with a Jewish enrichment program that enables a person to dive in, get involved, learn more about their heritage, as well as a leadership and development track, giving people opportunities to meet some of the biggest influential people in business, in politics, as well as various other options, including mental health and well-being training, as well as social action, volunteering, loads of other things that have been put together to form this beautiful harmony that really makes what we think is going to build the future Jewish community. And before we say goodbye tonight, I want to remind everyone about this program and show you this video of our latest project, Venture. That's it, Venture. If you are interested, applications are only open till early next week. We've received we've been inundated with loads of applications so far. So first come, first served. Get in there. Visit aish.org.uk/interns in order to sign up and register and secure your place. It's been a fantastic show. Thank you so much, Yafi. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested to find out more about what's going on at Aish UK, visit our website, aish.org.uk. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our Facebook page and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Join us at the same time, same place next week, Wednesday night live with Aish UK. Take care. Have a great night.